Okay, we go again. Max Verstappen took a commanding victory around the iconic circuit of Imola, and let's be honest, it was an absolutely brilliant race. Lewis Hamilton came home in P2 after a stunning recovery drive, and Lando Norris took the second podium of his Formula One career in P3. Welcome to episode 98 of our Formula One Grid Talk podcast, hosted by myself, Steph Wentworth, from All About SteF1 on YouTube. In this episode, joining me, we have Monkey Seat Podcast's Tom Horrox and Karl King. Hi, guys.
Hello.
And we have the host of Everything Racing, Everything F1 podcast, Scott Milnes. So we are here today and we're going to be reviewing the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. But before we get into it, let's just talk a little bit about Manscaped, because the Grid Talk podcast is powered by Manscaped. So if you go to www.manscaped.com, you can get 20% off and free shipping with our code GridTalk20. But guys, let's get straight into the podcast. And I want to know, before we get into it, give me one word to describe this race today.
Wet.
McLaren.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Good. I'm going to go with chaotic. But yeah, it was absolutely brilliant, wasn't it? So we did not probably expect that we were going to have such a chaotic race and so much in it. And I think that from last year's race, we weren't expecting Imola to be the best race of the season. And although we are only 2 races in, I think it was definitely a pretty good one. So let's just talk a little bit. Let's go from the bottom to the top, actually. So let's talk about the retirements that we had in this race. And the first one, Nicholas Latifi. Tom, what did you think about Nicholas's race? And were you disappointed to see him out so soon?
I was, actually, and it's a nice easy one to start with because we hardly saw him. It was his best qualifying performance of his career, which was fantastic to see that he's starting to get a handle of Formula One. I think he's a talented guy. Everyone says what a nice guy he is, and it's great to see him starting to get to grips with things again. But then a little trip across the gravel, and then just after rejoining, trying to make amends, going past the Haas driver, just misjudged it, and that was the end of his race. And that's all you can really say about Latifi's race. It's such a shame, given the definite improvement that he's shown. But that's kind of it. Real shame.
Yeah, definitely. And Karl, there was no investigation actually with that contact between Latifi and Nikita Mazepin, but there was contact. Would you have judged that as Latifi rejoining the track in an unsafe manner? And do you think there should have been an investigation?
Not really. It was a 50-50. He just rejoined the track. It wasn't that he was planning. He wasn't trying to gain position or even fight for that position at that point. He was just joining the track. Mazepin, that thing came in, and it just touched, but it wasn't. It wasn't. It shouldn't have been as big as it ended up being. And I think it was just a little tete-a-tete as opposed to anything. It was purely racing. Neither were really fighting for position of wherever the back they were. It sort of wasn't, and it was a nothing of a nothing, really.
Yeah, very disappointing though from Latifi, especially starting 14th. That was a great start from both of the Williams boys, but they both DNF'd. So let's move on to that incident between George Russell and Valtteri Bottas, because they were together throughout the race for quite a large portion of it. And I know that I tweeted that when they were next to each other, I think they were in P10, P11, and Russell was right behind him within DRS range. And I was thinking, oh no, is Valtteri Bottas in a Mercedes about to get overtaken by George Russell in a Williams? But it never happened until it did. And then we had that massive contact and that massive incident. It looked really, really bad from the replays. And obviously there was a massive force because they both ended up with a medical car. So, Scott, who's at fault for that incident?
I mean, can I just say, with the Latifi crash, when I saw the Williams, I was like, please don't be George. He's in my fantasy team. He's I love him. And we have a live watch along in the Discord chat, and I was gassing for Russell. I saw him creeping up to that 10th position and just thinking the same as you. And then, I mean, I was gutted. But when I first saw it, I had a very seeming Russell-like reaction to it. 100% thought maybe Bottas probably moved a bit, and then in the replays, in the red flag, I've got to say it's probably a racing incident. I mean, I think Russell showed probably a bit more of his rookie side, and seeing Bottas moving, maybe reacted that inch too far and went off. But yeah, I'd say it was 50-50. Really sad and quite unfortunate, because we were denied a great bit of racing, and seeing Lando on pole, having Lewis come good, and then also having George scoring points for Williams, it would have been fantastic.
Yeah, Tom, talk to me about how you think Toto would have reacted seeing George Russell, the Mercedes Junior, overtaking Valtteri Bottas in the Mercedes car right now. What was going through Toto's head?
Well, I feel sorry for the table that was directly in front of Toto at the time, put it that way. It's I'm sure there's going to be a couple of dents in that. I think it's going to be kind of mixed emotions from him, seeing, Bottas had a terrible race from start to finish, and then seeing George doing well. He's going to be, that's going to like put thoughts in his head about next season, and then seeing, I think he would have genuinely been pleased for Russell had the overtake come off. All I'll say is that I think there's absolutely no fault to be had from George Russell's side, but it wasn't caused by Bottas. The overtake was there. He had every right to go for that overtake. The inexperienced side of things, maybe he should have been a little more patient. I know he spent quite a lot of time behind him anyway, but given the track was still drying, it was very slippery offline. Moving into that position was always going to be a risk, and then with Bottas making that little move out, I mean, he was hugging the white line, and as George went to go, he's entitled to defend his line, but George was alongside him, and just he didn't make a very harsh, quick movement or anything, but just the movement that he did make was enough for the inexperienced Russell just to put him off, to put a wheel on the grass, and in those conditions, a wheel in the grass, you're going off. You're going straight into the wall, and just really a relief that that we all have bad memories of crashes at Tamburello, and it's actually the first time we've had a red flag at Imola since that crash at Tamburello in 1994. So just a relief that everyone's okay. Obviously, Bottas was quite heavily winded. I know they've had some arguments, exchanged some words around the whole thing as well. But yeah, I think Toto it's whether he goes for the raw talent that is George Russell, the safe hands that is Bottas. I think if that move has come off, then I think he's already, even though it's race 2, he's already made his decision for next year. But the fact that Russell has had a hand in both of his Mercedes cars going off track today, I think that's going to put a slight doubt in his mind.
Oh, I don't like that. That disappoints me a little bit.
I'm not saying it's his fault. I'm just saying that he was involved in both incidents.
Definitely. Karl, do you have anything else to add in terms of the Bottas Russell incident?
I think it was Bottas. I think Bottas did leave enough room. I can't overly fault Bottas. I love Russell to bits, but he did hit the grass. He did spin. It was pretty much his fault in some ways, and him going off. I mean, his reaction afterward was over the top and didn't need to happen. That whole conflict between the two of them just made both of them look really petty, and possibly more Russell, as he was the one striding over and whacking him on the head. Admittedly, he got the finger, which we all saw, which is quite funny seeing it a couple of times. Can't swear on there, but we can still stick the finger up. But I think I think if I was Toto, I would still be looking at Russell. He was going for a fight, and Bottas was just sat there playing it safe. And that's the same even when with the Hamilton, scenario. Yeah. It was again Russell trying to fight for his position, and he's got to fight for a position because that car's not going to take him there. So he's got to fight for it. So that's why he's a better racer than Bottas, in my opinion.
Definitely. And I think that something that that stuck out to me a lot during this race was the fact that Bottas was just chilling right at the back of the points positions for the majority of the race, when he is arguably in at least the second fastest car. We don't really know what the Mercedes is capable yet, because the wet conditions kind of equaled out the field a little bit more, but the Red Bull is looking very, very quick. So even in arguably the second fastest car compared with the 8th or 9th fastest car, and yeah, I just don't think Bottas should have been in a position to have been overtaken by a Williams at any point. So I think that's where my position lies, and I think he should have been doing a much better job. But we've talked about that incident. But let's move on to another pair of incidents, shall we say? And let's talk about the Haas boys who finished in P16 and P17. Now, they both had several incidents throughout the race, and let's just talk about them together because they both ended up finishing about 2 laps down, just because the Haas is so far off the pace. So Mick had that incident where he was weaving to try and get some warmth in his tyres at the beginning of the race, and then clipped the wall on the pit lane exit, I think it was, and then had no front wing and had to go around the circuit at least 2 laps, I think it was, before even being able to pit. So let's talk about Mick. He finished in front of Mazepin in P16. Scott, what was going on when was it just the wet conditions that threw him off and he ended up in the wall?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a case of he was obviously wanting to capitalize from the restart as best he could. Probably just he just binned it, didn't he, on a wet part of the track, got a little bit too eager. I thought it was Mazepin at first when I saw it, and because I must say that the race in general was so interesting. It took, because a lot of our conversation in the Discord started with, right boys, what's your bets on the lap he spins on, and when I saw that I was like, oh yeah, he's still running. But yeah, no, I think Mick just showed probably a little bit too much hunger and a bit too much inexperience. Yeah, binned it.
Yeah, disappointing for him. But the fact that he still ended up finishing ahead of Mazepin after that whole losing a front wing and going around the pit incident. Tom, can we just talk about that? Why did they close the pit entry when they knew that he was probably running with some damage on his car and it was likely dangerous? Because at the very, very front of his nose, there was something that was actually dragging and sparking, and it could have definitely fallen off, got into his floor, caused some damage. I don't know. Why did they close the pit entry but not let him come into pit because of his damage?
Well, that's a laugh, isn't it? No, I think it's I think the debris from his front wing was sitting on the pit exit, so allowing someone to come into the pit lane, they would have to drive over that debris on the way out, and that in itself was it's safer having a car driving around the track with no front wing than having cars coming through the pit lane. So absolutely, it's the right decision. Anytime you have an incident in or around the pit entry or exit, you have to close the pit lane. The most annoying thing for me was the fact that it was clearly obvious the pit lane was closed, but the commentators weren't able to comment on it. It took them until he went around before they actually noticed that the pit lane was closed, when it was blindingly obvious that the pit lane was closed. But yeah, I mean, it's I think with Mick, he started on the wet tyres, so he had a gamble. That's the only thing Haas can do. But and then he's just not used to driving in those conditions. I mean, just trying a little too hard, much like Russell last year. And then his engineer telling him, "Oh, don't worry about going fast." That's probably for the best in a Haas, really, isn't it? So that was probably the high moment of the race for me, for Mick Schumacher's race, anyway.
Yeah, definitely. So all around disappointing for Mick. But let's talk about the other elephant in the room. Let's talk about Mazepin. And he did have a little spin. It was towards the end of the race, actually. So I'm surprised he managed to make it that far. But he finished the race this week. So that's a congratulations are in order for him, because that's something he's not managed to do yet. So, Karl, let's just talk to me. We didn't really see very much of him, but he was involved in that Latifi incident, and he did have that spin towards the end of the race. Anything more to comment on?
I mean, the man looks like an unshaved testicle, but he is complete.
Get Manscaped. Get Manscaped.
Get Manscaped.
He's got it too much.
He just looks like an unshaved testicle. Just look at his face. You just want to shave it off. Anyway, I mean, he's got so much bum fluff around. Anyway, he's just painful. I mean, you say he finished the race. How many laps down? 2 laps down, possibly. If not, let's be honest, possibly 3 laps. I lost count. I don't know how I think if there wasn't the red flag, we would have been 4 laps down by the point, roughly. That I don't even know if that's allowed. How many times can you get lapped without being taken off? Tom probably knows the rules better than I would. But it's just ridiculous that they are literally scraping around. His spin is nothing unfamiliar, and I'm surprised that we've got to that. It took him so long to spin. As I said, the Latifi incident, I can't fault him really as much as I want to. I didn't think there would be anyone that I'd like less than Latifi, but here we go. So I think he's just a bit of a It was a nothing race for him. He just stayed out of the way when he can, and then just trundled around. I mean, I've got my 94-year-old grandmother can probably do that, because that's pretty much the same level of skill
That's
that
pretty
man
impressive.
has. Yeah, but I mean, he's just a waste of space, and Haas are a waste of space at the moment. I know they're planning for next year, but there's no advantage to them being on this track apart from wasting space. Just don't bother. Just leave and come back next year. I don't know if you can. There's probably a rule on that, but
Interesting. Okay, so I think Karl's made his thoughts on Haas very, very clear there. But let's move on, because now we have Sebastian Vettel, who finished at P15, and even though he did not finish the race, he still finished ahead of the Haas. That's how far behind the Haas really were. So Sebastian Vettel, very, very interesting. He ended up starting from the pit lane due to a problem at the very, very beginning, and he ended up with a stop go penalty as well for not having his wheels on his car by the 5-minute warning. So it was not a great race for him. It's now his second race with his brand new team, Aston Martin, and he has not scored any points yet. Ooh, Scott, talk to me about Seb. How is he coping in this new team? Because I'm not sure it's all sunny like he might have thought it would be.
It's not the dream start for them, is it? Unfortunately, but I mean, I'll be honest. Seb as an individual is one that I've really grown to like over the years. Like when he was a lot younger. I mean, I was a bitter Lewis fan when Red Bull were dominating, of course. Not to the point that some are with Mercedes now, but. I think it is a bit of a shame, because obviously everything that happened with him at Ferrari, because that was very much a dream move gone wrong for him. I had a lot of hope, especially with them coming off the back of being the pink Mercedes season. I thought, there might be a really good car there for him. So to see the issues of the cars, I mean, for both him and Stroll to have very similar rear brake issues coming into the race, I thought that was it's not a good sign at all. And of course, you've got Otmar's stance on the rules, wanting that change, which I think is quite laughable to a degree. But it's a shame. It was nice to see him fighting with Perez. I enjoyed that, and I'm a bit gutted that didn't get to play out how I wanted it to. But I mean, definitely him finishing above the Haas's and how he ended his race definitely speaks to a lot of what Karl was just saying, which I think is, says it all, to be honest.
Yes, it does. We don't need to say it, it's unspoken. In 14th, we had Antonio Giovinazzi. Tom, I don't think I saw Giovinazzi throughout the entirety of the race. Did you pick up on anything?
Not a lot. I mean, he had the first time we really saw him was he had a brake problem on lap 41, where they pulled him into the pits and then just pulled the blanking off and sent him back out on his merry way. But that's yeah, as you said, that's all we heard from him in the entire race. I mean, both of the Alphas were completely anonymous. I guess when you're kind of in that gap at the back where you're ahead of the jokes at the back, but you're nowhere near the rest of the field that are fighting for that, the 3rd to 6th place lot. They're just kind of nailed in that 7th, 8th place, or 8th place even, just kind of looking around, just going, is anyone going to play with us today? But yeah, they got no pace, they've got no development, they've got nothing good coming through. They've got no good, exciting young drivers, and they're just a nothing team for me at the moment. And it just frustrates me that they're in this situation. I think the reason is they're seeing out this last year with Alfa, and Alfa are going to be pulling out of the sport, and then Sauber will be back in a different guise, whether it be as a Renault Junior team or with another investor next year. I think that's the reason why they've re-signed Raikkonen and Giovinazzi, because the Alfa deal was only renewed for a year. I think they're looking to get out of that as soon as possible, because it's not led to anything. They've had no benefit from it whatsoever, apart from maybe a bit of advertising. So I think it's going to be the end for Kimi and the end for Giovinazzi at the end of the year. And that's why they re-signed them, because they've just got no interest in the project anymore. So that's my take on it. I could be completely wrong, and I have no facts to base that on, but that's just what I think.
Yeah, I think it speaks volumes as well that Giovinazzi was so far behind Kimi as well in the end, after this is his 3rd year in Formula One. I mean, we're expecting more from him now, and Kimi, who is coming to the end of his career. I know we've been saying this for years now, but surely we have to be coming to the end. And for him to be so much further ahead, it speaks volumes in terms of what Giovinazzi is doing right now. So yeah, we'll move on and we'll talk about a rookie. We'll talk about Yuki Tsunoda, who is the best performing rookie of the year so far. But this wasn't a great race for him. And I had a lot of positivity coming into this weekend for Yuki because he'd done a lot of testing here and a lot of shakedowns, and he had a lot of experience on this track, more than, some of the current drivers. So I had high hopes for Yuki, but unfortunately it just didn't play out. Karl, thoughts on Yuki's weekend as a whole?
You're muted, mate. Still muted.
Still can't hear you.
There we go. Are we there?
Good job.
Hooray!
Hooray!
There we go. Okay. I was just enjoying listening. That's why. Tsunoda. He obviously had a massive crash at the end of Quali 1, which obviously didn't help anything, and he started at the back of the pack. He kept out of the way of Maziballs, and that's amazing. And then he got, to be fair, 13th from the back isn't too bad when you're a rookie and you're not in the best car. That on a track that you officially can't overtake on, in some ways. I think that's very good. And look who's in front of him, Perez and Alonso. He was never going to catch them. Like, their experience just weighs out anything he's done. He's obviously the best of the pack of the rookie. He's going to win the rookie of the year purely because the other two are not that great and are in the car that they're in. But I think I don't know. He did have one spin at one point, if I remember correctly, during the race, but it was a bit of a nothing, and he kept a level head throughout of it. We didn't hear any of Crazy Tsunoda's moans going through the radio for once, so which is quite quite a shame because he comes up with the best ones. But I think he's a really solid driver. He's one to watch. He looks like a 10-year-old, so he's at least got 50 years in the track. What more can you say about him, really? It was just a steady, boring-ish race for him, apart from his little spin.
Yeah, but on to bigger and better things for Yuki next week, or the weekend after, when we go to Portugal. Fingers crossed he'll have a better overall turn of events for him.
Can I just say, I absolutely love Yuki.
Yes.
I love Japan as a country, and I've been so gutted since Kobayashi's been out, and to have a Japanese driver back on the grid and him such a fantastic personality, I'm so happy.
He's a little pocket rocket, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's such a little pocket rocket. That's
amazing. He's about the jockey height, isn't he?
Yeah. Yeah, he's just in the wrong sport, really.
Yeah.
But
designed to go fast.
Well. Yeah.
Guys, okay, so apparently Grid Talk is now the official sponsor of Yuki Tsunoda, because we are his biggest fans. So hit us up, Yuki. But let's talk about Sergio Perez, who we just brought up, and he finished the race in P12. Now, this race was not without incident. There was a lot going on and a lot that we could talk about Sergio Perez. So he had that start where he was obviously jumped by Max Verstappen. Then he had, I can't even name the incidents in order, but he ended up with that stop and go penalty from when he went off into the gravel and overtook people under the safety car. So yeah, not the best race for Checo, was it, Scott?
No, it was a bit of a shame as well, because he was Red Bull's saving grace yesterday when Verstappen didn't put in the show. And we going into the race, it was all Red Bull fighting partnership. This is what we've been kind of waiting for, to really take the fight to Mercedes. And he went backwards, and it was quite a shame to see, to be honest. I bet Christian Horner was not a happy bunny. I was probably having Albon Gasly flashbacks at points during that race, I think.
Is that chair cursed?
Yes.
Is that chair cursed?
I think it's got to be at this point, hasn't it? From going all the way from like Weber to I mean, yeah, it's got to be. It's like that chair in the office where people say, don't sit on that because you'll end up getting pregnant and going on maternity leave.
I've never heard that before, ever.
I've been in 2 offices that have had a pregnancy chair.
Never heard that. But yes, that second seat is definitely cursed. Tom, what did you make of the whole stop-go penalty? I thought it was really harsh.
Well,
maybe that's just me.
Well, it's when the safety car is out, it's no overtaking, and the only way you can overtake the car ahead is if they've got a problem. Now, I think sitting in the gravel is, or rather driving through the gravel off the track, for me is a problem. So the 2 cars that went past him had absolutely, were absolutely dead right to go past him, but he can't then take him back again. It's not the formation lap. He's absolutely banged to rights, and he should have known that. He's an experienced guy. You'd expect that from someone at the back or one of the rookies, but Perez, he should know all about the rules coming back from safety cars and stuff. He does it enough, but he had a poor start. Lost out to Verstappen, and then he also lost out to Leclerc. He had a little squirrely moment where he got a little bit loose. He had a steering wheel issue. He had a little spin as well and fell to the back. But when he got his 10-second penalty, he served it just before the red flag. Got his new steering wheel as well, so that problem was sorted. He still finished a minute behind Verstappen in 23 laps. That's just, that's Albon territory, which I know you like Albon, so I'm sorry for saying that, but that's the kind of performances that Albon and Gasly were putting in that were calling for his head. But because it's Sergio Perez, those calls won't come. But it's worrying that, he did say it'd take him a few races to get into it, and it was a good qualifying session as well. I think peak Verstappen would have been on pole, and then Perez would have been a comfortable second, but without Hamilton's heroics. But it's just worrying with the start he's made. But yeah, it's that gap that worries me. I think his first race was actually better than people were making out, because in clear air he was on the same pace as Verstappen and looking solid. But this race was, you've definitely got to chalk it down to just a bad race. I just hope that he can get it together and recover and be that person that Max Verstappen needs, or it's going to be a very short title race.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. I actually had really high hopes for Checo, and I do like Albon, but I knew that Checo was going to be a better chance in that car. But this race kind of made me think, oh, okay, maybe that Red Bull seat is cursed. Maybe Checo's not going to be able to overcome that. So it will be interesting to see how it works out in the next couple of races, because he kind of demonstrated how difficult that car was to drive with the amount of, with how squirmy he was and going off. So I don't think it demonstrated that the car was easy to drive. So we'll see in the next couple of races before I make my final decision on Sergio Perez. But Fernando Alonso, he was actually squirreling, what's the word, with Sebastian Vettel for a while, and I was thinking, what year is this? But yes, Fernando Alonso came home at P11 and Esteban Ocon, actually his teammate, in P10. And there was a great little fight that was going on between the two of these. They weren't in the points position at the time, but there was a great little fight going on between them for several corners where they were wheel to wheel. And I thought that was absolutely brilliant. But I was surprised that Ocon had the jump on Fernando. Let's talk about them together. Karl, what was your thoughts on the two Alpines today?
Don't get me started on Alonso. You've picked the wrong person.
Yeah.
I can't stand him.
Oh, no.
I really can't stand him. Ocon, for once, Ocon seemed to have a bit of spunk, for want of a better word. He just felt like he was racing. It felt like he was trying to prove a point against Alonso. And that really was interesting. I think Alonso's never going to do well. He's an old champion that's been out of the race for a couple of years, and the cars are very different, and the times are very different, and everything, and obviously the track with being raining and being the Renault there, it's, I think they're in the right place. I think this is where we should be looking at them, this season. I think with a bit more work, yes, I can see them fighting the Ferraris and the McLarens, but this is sort of where I expected them. They played a great race, but they, nothing to write home about. Which is sort of what we expect. I think anyone that expected Alonso to come in and be the saving grace of Renault was very, very misinformed. Why would if that was the case, why would they kept Ocon?
Just at me, okay? At me next time. No, I did expect some good things from Alonso, and I'm sure he can deliver. I'll make my judgment on him in a few races time as well. But Esteban Ocon, Scott, he actually ended up in the points this race with just the sole 1 point for finishing in 10th. Any comments on Ocon's race? Was it him that kind of ended up in the gravel next to the Bottas George crash? Because there was an Alpine that was dancing in the gravel a little bit there before they managed to get.
I think it was.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've on a whole been quite disappointed with them as a team, because to see where they were last season as Renault and having the bet with Cyril for the tattoo on the podium, and then see Danny do that twice at the end of the season, to then see this, I was happy for Ocon, because he is showing a lot of hunger, and I think he is, as you said, trying to stick it to Alonso a bit and prove a point. I mean, personally, I am a fan of Alonso as a person, but I do think he was like, right, gonna go and win the Triple Crown. Didn't do that. Probably was like, I'll go back to F1. I was great there, and as the sport's developed and aged, and unfortunately, I don't think he is and has kept up with the times well enough to compete. And that's where you're gonna, I reckon, unfortunately, see him probably regularly losing out to Ocon this season, I think.
Oh, interesting. That's going to be a very, very interesting teammate dynamic.
It's going
to be an interesting one to follow. You're right. I did predict Alonso to beat Ocon, but I don't know how it's going to play out for the rest of the season, so I will wait. I will reserve judgment on that as well. The second Alfa Romeo driver of Kimi Räikkönen finished in 9th position. Like we said, we didn't really see much of either of the Alphas. Does anyone have anything to comment on Kimi's race?
How did you get to 9th?
I will say he had the greatest view in the house of the Bottas and Russell crash. Yeah. He just kept his nose clean. He was under investigation at the end for some kind of infringement, but it doesn't look like anything was given. But yeah, again, as I said, like Giovinazzi, just no real impact on the race. But that's kind of been Kimi for the last 5 years, really.
But I think, that view, he was very lucky to, and whoever that Alpine was that was in there as well, they were very lucky not to be involved in that incident. Yeah. But I think that's because Räikkönen just reads the road and knows it well enough, just keeps out trouble, and that's how he got up to 9th. Because there's no other way he got up to 9th apart from just keeping his nose clean.
Exactly. Yeah, experience is lending a hand for him. But let's move on, because now we're at the top 8, and this top 8 was very, very interesting, and the race was very, very spicy in the fight between these guys. So P8, we had Pierre Gasly, who started really, really well, was doing in some really great battles. I thought he did a great job. I thought this was a great race for him. What did you think, Scott?
I love Gasly, so it was nice to see him do well, because there was a couple of points in the race where it didn't look like it was going to be his day, but I think him and Yuki are a fantastic partnership for AlphaTauri. So in terms of, as we said, with Alonso and Ocon, in terms of ones to watch, I think those pair could really do, especially when we see that if it gets a bit tense upfield and we do have some collisions. And I think the AlphaTauri are one of those teams that are perfectly positioned to capitalize on any upfront drama, especially with the McLarens reaching out now as well. So yeah, no, it was good. It was a good day for him, and I'm very looking forward to seeing. I want to see them two tangling it up round some corners. So yeah, I've got my fingers crossed for that one.
But no contact.
Hopefully not. No. I'd like to see them both staying on the track.
Fingers crossed. Lance Stroll in P7. I thought he did a pretty decent job. He was defending from Bottas for quite a while. Tom, what did you make of Lance's race? Is there anything particular to report on it, or was it just, solid, decent?
Do you know what? He actually had quite an eventful race, I thought. Obviously, he had his problems at the start with the brakes. So to keep a cool head and cool brakes as well at the start of the race, that's a decent performance there. He had a good start and then climbed his way up to 7th, which is obviously where he eventually finished. He put up a strong defence against Hamilton when Hamilton was coming through, and he had a great battle with Bottas as well. When him and Bottas took forever to get past him, he passed him in the pit stops, and then after the pit stops, when the cars are coming through to lap him, when Max came through to lap him, he then went back past Bottas again. So showed good opportunistic driving there. So no, solid race for Lance. Probably the best I've seen him in quite a while, because I'm not a Lance Stroll fan. But today he was probably in the top 5 for performances, made no mistakes, and just did a solid job.
Yeah,
Well
I
done.
thought he did a great job, and I think he's one of the better drivers in the wet, because if we think back to Turkey in 2020 when he managed to get his maiden pole position, so that was brilliant, and I think that he demonstrates that he is good in the wet. He can keep a cool head. So yeah, I want to echo everything that you said. So yeah, great job by Lance. Anything else to add? Does anyone want to add anything on Lance? Or are we good?
I must say, Lance, I mean, I'm annoyed at myself for this a bit, but I hated him. I couldn't stand him. I thought, oh, hello, billionaire, rich kid, son. He's come for a nice day out at the F1. All lovely. But the more I've seen him in interviews and actually see him as a person, he's growing on me, and I don't like it. It's but no, I mean, if you can talk more on the track, we'll see.
See, as he goes up in my estimations, Otmar goes down. Maybe
Exactly.
it's related. Do you know?
Interesting.
Maybe.
Yeah,
Don't get me started on
someone needs
Otmar.
to investigate that. Investigate if there's a correlation. Okay, so we're all agreeing that Lance Stroll had a pretty decent race. Let's talk about the second placed Daniel Ricciardo, who's the second placed McLaren, shall I say?
Yes.
Yeah, second place Daniel Ricciardo. No, not yet. But yeah, he came in 6th place, and I thought he's warming up to that car quite well. We did see a couple of fights between him and the McLarens, and he was actually the lead McLaren until we received some team orders. So what did we think of the team orders to start with? Do we think that they were needed?
The fact he got team orders suggests he wasn't liking that car that much, because obviously Lando had the pace behind him. Obviously, even when Lando drove off, I think Sainz then overtook Ricciardo quite quickly after it. And if it was the other way around, I bet you Lando was not, blocking him. Lando wouldn't have had Sainz coming up behind him as much. I think Ricciardo's not happy in that car. I don't know why, but he's not happy in that car.
Doesn't look comfortable, does he?
Oh no!
I mean, if you look at it, it's. I mean, he had a good start to get up to 5th, but it's got to be bad to to be told to let your teammate through. But he just didn't have the pace. He's just after the restart. Yeah, he started on the soft tyres, which the idea of that was to try and grab places and then hold on to them, because you can't overtake at Imola in the dry. We know that, but he finished. What was it? Over a pit stop behind his teammate after just 23 laps of running. That's not good enough. And the last race he wasn't on a par with Lando, but that was a lot of that was down to damage from Gasly hitting him at the backside, from what we understand. But we can't say that for definite. So 2 races down, I'm slightly disappointed. I've always rated Daniel very, very highly, and to see him that far behind Lando, is it because Lando's that good, or is it just that Daniel's not used to that car yet? But no, I think he's it's great that he's picking up the points, but he's going to become a number 2 driver very quickly unless he can get on top of things.
Yeah,
I definitely think it's a bit of both with that. Half him getting used to it, and half it's just he's just not comfortable. I think if there was any debate to be had about whether team orders were necessary, it ended about 12 seconds after the overtake took place, because he had like a 2-second gap on him almost straight away. Like, Lando's pace was phenomenal.
Yeah, I think we saw Lando's pace as well in qualifying, and he just looked like he was so quick around this circuit and so quick and turned on in that car. So I'm surprised that they didn't make the switch earlier. But yeah, Lando's pace was definitely speaking for itself today. So I do think they made the right decision. And what I like is that Daniel respected the team orders immediately and just got on with it, because that got McLaren the most amount of points that they could have got today, because they would not have got a podium with Daniel, whereas they got a podium with Lando. So they made the right call. Very difficult to see team orders.
Probably used to team orders from his Red Bull days. So
yeah, not too foreign for him. He knows how to maneuver them. But let's move on to the Ferraris in P4 and P5. I honestly was so surprised by the Ferraris, and I think they've come out with such great pace at the beginning of this season, which is kind of shocking because we saw how terrible they were performing last year. So they've made massive strides, and I don't think necessarily the Ferrari is the second quickest car on the grid or the third, fourth. I don't think it is, but I think in the hands of Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, it is very, very quick, and they know how to maneuver it. And the fact that Charles was running in the podium positions for a large portion of the race, I think definitely speaks to his ability to control that car and extract the maximum out of it. So Tom, let's talk about Carlos to begin with, because he was a bit reserved in Bahrain, let's say, but he took a few more risks this week, and I think it paid off for him.
Yes, yeah, he did. He was a bit more clinical, but he was kept blaming himself for making loads of mistakes. But when you take the mistakes out, and he's passed Stroll and Gasly on the restart for the first safety car, but then he lost out to Norris. He had a trip across the gravel twice in 4 laps, lap 11 and 15. But then he got lucky with the red flag, as did Lando and Charles Leclerc, having not made their pit stop yet. And then that boosted them straight up into the podium places, which is great, deserved, because they had good race pace. But I think it's gone some way to recovering his disappointment from the last race, and but he still he stayed in touch with Leclerc after the red flag, so that was positive. That in dry conditions, in pace, he can match Leclerc, which means for me, if he was ahead of Leclerc on track, he would have been able to keep Leclerc behind him. It wasn't like Leclerc was pulling away from him, and he stayed within 2 seconds right up until the flag. So he can definitely take some positivity from that. He does need to start getting ahead of Leclerc though, because Leclerc's a specialist qualifier. We know that. Sainz is a decent qualifier, but and he gets a nickname Sunday Sainz. He needs to put that into practice and start beating Leclerc on Sundays, or certainly showing some fight and catching up and equaling him on qualifying as well, or again he will fall into that number 2 driver category very quickly.
Mm-hmm. And just to compare how Carlos is performing with how Daniel is performing, I think that we can see that Carlos looks a little bit more comfortable in his new team than Daniel looks, and he's definitely taken to that car a lot better. So Karl, why do you think that is? Do you think there's a reason behind it? Do you think the Ferrari just suits Carlos's style of driving, or do you think there's another reason as to why he just seems to have taken to it?
I think Ferrari car is just better this year. They've obviously worked on it during their year of being naughty last year, and they decided to work on this year's a little bit more. And obviously I'm expecting great things from the new car next year. Carlos has always wanted to be a Ferrari driver and is towing the line slightly along with Leclerc. He sort of is playing that second driver at the moment, but I think it's a steady game to play that, because I think if you were to go in there and start throwing your weight around, let's see what happened to Vettel. Let's look back at what happened with Vettel on that one, and trying to be a big name in a very small pond. And you've got to play that game with Ferrari. We all know that Leclerc is God's gift to Binotto, whatever his name is. I can never name it. Where's Wally or whatever his name is. But they're both. I think Carlos is a great driver. I think he's settling in a bit more. I think he was a bit more prepared with the Ferrari as well. I know that Daniel had a long time running up to McLaren, but I just had this feeling that was on the cards for a long time, because it was always like, if there was an opportunity, he wants to go to Ferrari. So I think there was a bit more prepared. Well, I think it was more Ricciardo just jumping out the hot seat of Renault straight into the McLaren hot seat back in the beginning of last season. And then, he never really, he tried to fight a decent fight in the Renault. So I think Carlos is just better, slightly better driver. I think he's a slightly younger driver, and obviously comes from a great pedigree of driving standards. So I think he's, the Ferraris have got great drivers now, and they should bloody well keep them and work with them, because that could be a winning formula. They're 4th and 5th.
It could be. We'll have to wait and see. Maybe in 2022. But let's move on to our podium position. So we finally made it. Let's talk about our podiums. I'm coming to Tom to talk about P3, because he's in his McLaren cap. and he's repping the McLaren driver of Lando Norris, who came P3 to take his second podium of his Formula One career. His first one was in Austria, the first race of the season last year, and his second podium has come in the second race of the season this year. So what did we make of Lando's race?
Oh, buzzing. I just want to apologise for being so insufferable. It's just probably a good thing that we're not going out live, so you can't see all the memorabilia I'm bossing. So no, absolutely over the moon with the performance of Lando. So he lost a couple of places on lap one. Had a little bashy with Stroll, but fortunately didn't look like there was any damage. Stunning double pass on lap 8, and then got Gasly shortly afterwards. He did benefit from the red flag, as I was alluded to earlier, but he did manage, obviously, pass Leclerc at the restart. He seemed to be always reporting problems, starting on those soft tyres at the restart that shouldn't have performed as well as they did right up until the end. He kept Hamilton behind him, for longer than Leclerc managed to, and Leclerc had the benefit of DRS to defend with from Norris. So stunning performance there on tyres that shouldn't have gone that long, and the fact that he then managed to continue pulling away from Leclerc at the end of the race as well after Hamilton had got past. It really showed some maturity from him, really did. And I dared to believe, 4 laps from the end, I dared to believe that he might be able to hold on for second place. But I wasn't disappointed to see Lewis go past, but because I knew that was always going to happen. It was just going to be that this absolutely impossible dream that he would somehow get second. I was just waiting for the shot to change and see Verstappen on the side of the road with a steaming Honda engine, and I was just like, come on, this would be amazing. British 1-2, but yeah, the first double British podium since China in 2012. Wow. So buzzing about that. Yeah, Hamilton and Button the last time in China in 2012 in McLaren. So yeah, absolutely buzzing to see that result. Stunning result. And if any of you lot vote for anyone besides driver of the day, I'm logging off this call right now.
I voted for Lando.
Bye. See ya. See ya. No, 100% echo everything that you're saying. I think Lando did an absolutely brilliant job. He did get the fan driver of the day, so that just shows that all of the fans at home saw how brilliantly he was driving, and I think it was a very well-deserved podium, definitely. But let's move on to our P1 and P2, and let's just talk about them together, because I do think that their fates were interlinked throughout this race as well. So Lewis Hamilton started on pole position, but at the very beginning of the race, going into turn 1, Max Verstappen, he had him, and there was a little bit of contact, and Lewis sustained a little bit of damage. So from that point on, Max was net P1 throughout the entirety of the race, which was very well deserved, because I think Max drove absolutely fantastically. But Lewis also drove fantastically because he had to do a recovery drive. So Scott, talk me through Lewis's race and how well you think that he performed in the end.
I mean, you love to see it, don't you? To be honest, like we've wanted this fight to happen, and it's coming to fruition. And we're 2 races in, and look at the level of excitement it's already bringing back to the sport, which is great. Lewis, though, he showed today what he does best. Like, fair enough, he made a mistake, and you see many others, they make mistakes and don't have that hunger to come back. But I mean, I was pretty blown away by some of his very basic overtakes on his climb back through, because they were all just textbook clean. No, there was no more errors. You could see he hadn't lost that hunger, and for a 7-time world champion, you might have that complacency to sit back and go, well, but he doesn't show that, and I love it. And seeing him go for and get the fastest lap as well, brilliant, because it adds that extra little touch into the rivalry with him now being a point ahead. I was praying that Max would absolutely go for it last couple of laps to try and get the fastest lap, bin it, and then see Lewis and Norris top 2 would have just made my day. But no, I've always been a big fan of Lewis. In fact, like his debut race, I was about 18. It was 2007, wasn't it? His debut season.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, so I was 17. But I always watched Formula One with my old man. But that season was where I really became a fan. So Lewis has just been, the guy since then. And I was sat on the edge of my seat, loving it, feeling like a teenager again, watching Lewis bomb around the track. So yeah, it was great. It's great to see. I'm kind of glad he made the mistake so I could get to see him overtaken.
Yeah, because what we hear a lot about Lewis Hamilton is that he's in the Mercedes. He's always at the front of the grid, and this just demonstrates that he does still have his abilities, and he is great in wheel-to-wheel combat, because on a circuit that is so notoriously difficult to overtake, especially with these big Formula One cars now on such an old school circuit, it's very difficult to overtake. But yet he was making those moves, so I think it just proved a lot. It proved a lot to the haters, and maybe the haters still hate on him, and they will. But yeah, it proved a lot to all the fans that were watching, and I think that he did a fantastic job. So who wants to wait, hold on. I just don't know where I was going with that. I was just going to say, how many other drivers do you think would have actually tried to get it out of the gravel once they'd kind of beached it in there? Because Lewis worked so hard to make sure that that was not the end of his race. And I don't know if there's another driver on the grid that would have worked that hard and done so much to make sure that they did not DNF.
They would have all tried, but not all of them would have succeeded.
Yeah, I think maybe a few people would have, given it a bit more of a go than others. But I could have seen that steering wheel being thrown in a few different situations, 100%. Because there's a lot of, I think there is a lot of drivers on the track that haven't got that level of coolness about them. They're very hot-headed.
Just never gives up, does he?
Can I be the person that to poo-poo slightly on Hamilton's hit?
No, I'm joking.
And I only say this because if his lovely Mercedes friends, if Russell and Bottas didn't crash, he would have been a lap down. Oh yes, he made 8 amazing passes. Would he have made 16 or 17 where we were at that point had he not been able to unlap himself? And
very interesting.
Would have been in a very different position had he not been able to unlap himself. And that, I think I'm more moaning not about Hamilton's skill of driving, more moaning about the rules there, because I feel like that just lost almost some of the fun, and it just pushed, and also the fact that we started as a rolling start as well.
Yeah,
those two things really, really disappointed me with this race. And I think Hamilton played the game as he always does in these situations absolutely perfectly. And he is a phenomenal racer. Please don't ever think I'm saying anything, but I think he was one of the luckiest racers out there today to get into the position of where he got to.
He definitely got his fair share of luck, but given that the gap that he was ahead of everyone else and that they were ahead of everyone else, he was still, even after his pit stop, he was still in 9th place before the red flag. So he still would have been able to recover to points. Yes, he wouldn't have got second. He probably would have got 6th or 7th. But the fact that he was still able to recover to points from that was just underlines his talent on that. But yeah, he definitely got lucky with the red flag, 100%.
I think there's always an element of luck in F1, no matter what the situation 100%. Is. Because I think as much as F1 as a sport is, like everything, a combination of art and science, it's a combination of luck and skill.
Gasly's win last year. And that was probably the biggest one of luck.
But I will say on that as well, I think that what lost Hamilton the race today wasn't Hamilton, it was Mercedes, because Hamilton did everything. You know, he had the damage to the car at the start, yet he still managed to keep in touch with Verstappen. He kept his tyres in check, kept them going right up to the point when the track was dry. He was less than a second behind Verstappen when Verstappen came in for the tyres. And then if it weren't for the slow pit stop from Mercedes, he would have come out side by side with Verstappen and potentially may have got that position. And then come the red flag, what happens then? They change tyres, they go on to tyres till the end of the race, and potentially he could have won the race. It's all ifs, buts and maybes, but I think Mercedes have made more of an error than Hamilton have in this race.
Yeah, I actually I was telling this to my brother and my dad, how I thought that it was Mercedes' fault, because when the way Red Bull pitted Verstappen, I thought was very, very strange, because they pitted him into a lot of traffic, and Hamilton at that time was talking about how he was fine on these tires and he was pumping out like really, really quick laps, and he was making up that time on Verstappen. So I thought Mercedes were going to leave him out a little bit and try to gain the lead that way. But then they brought him in the lap after, and I was a bit confused. I was like, okay, why have Mercedes elected to do that? Because he came out into the same amount of traffic that Verstappen then had to do, and had to make his way through all of that traffic as well, which inevitably is kind of what made him go end up in the gravel, because he was trying to overtake on the wet side of the track, and that's just where George Russell would let him overtake him. So I think that Mercedes' strategy wasn't great, but I do think they were trying to cover Red Bull, so I understand where they were coming from. But at the same time, Hamilton is so brilliant with tyre management that I genuinely thought he could have gone a lot longer on those intermediate tyres.
I think they were far too precautious.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about a man that finished a race on 3 tyres. Like, leave him out there for a bit.
Right. But this is what happened last year with Red Bull. They were kept watching the backs over Mercedes and kept mucking about trying to chase up to Mercedes. This year, Mercedes are now trying to work out what the hell Red Bull are doing all the time, and it seems to be a game of cat and mouse the other way. You know, if each of these teams
really
actually played
mouse this time,
it's big mouse. But if either of these teams just concentrated on their own game, it would have been a lot better. They'll be a lot better, and you know, instead of trying to worry about what the other one's worrying about.
Definitely. So that brings us on to our P1 man, Max Verstappen. I think we can all agree that he drove a fantastic race. It was a very commanding victory, and he seemed very in control for the majority of the race, apart from that bit right before this the restart at the about halfway through after the red flag. Apart from that bit where it looked like he was going to go off and Charles Leclerc was going to take the lead, and we all know from Sergio Perez that you can't retake under a safety car. So Max Verstappen would have lost that position and not been able to get it back. So yeah, apart from that, he drove error-free really and had a fantastic race. Who's gonna talk me through how great Verstappen did today?
If you go back to that, sorry, just picking up on the stuff about that little moment that Verstappen had. What was interesting was Leclerc and Lando slamming the brakes on behind.
They weren't allowed to pass him because he was the safety car. It's only if he was off. It was only if he was off the track, because he'd become the safety car. If he'd have left the track, then they could have passed him.
But then was he not off the track at that point?
No. If you go back. There's a great video of Hakkinen when he becomes a safety car, and he had a problem with his engine. He couldn't engage a gear, and he was driving down the start-finish straight at about 30 miles an hour, and you got all the cars are just staying level with him. And as soon as he passes the line, they just swamp him. It's exactly the same situation. Unless he was off the track, they wouldn't be allowed to overtake him.
So that's why they had to brake.
Yeah, if it happened the previous lap, then it would have been fair game. They could have gone past him.
Watching that moment was like, as an Arsenal fan watching any football match, where I'm like,
It was a good attempt, but those
yeah, interesting. Apart from that little bit, error-free. Scott, anything to mention on Verstappen's race? I mean, he finished about, 22 seconds ahead of Lewis Hamilton in second place. So he was really, really just flying at the end of the race. There was honestly no one that was going to catch him.
I mean, I like Verstappen as a guy and a driver. I think he's for a young man, really impressive in the way he handles himself. I'm very glad he is young, because it means he'll get his chance at success when Lewis does hang up his mantle. But I'm glad that they're going to overlap to fight a bit. But he proved some of his haters wrong again today. I think he showed that he has that level of hunger and consistency to put a solid car in a solid position. And I've never been his biggest supporter. I don't mind him. He's a great, he's a great driver and that. But it was good to see. It was akin to any performance Lewis has probably put in over the last 4 or 5 years, and I honestly think if you did put him in the same car, Lewis would come out on top more so than not. But I think that they would be, he's shown today that he's up there in terms of his skill level, which is great. And can I just say, I also loved how Lewis was with Lando over the course of this whole weekend, from being supportive with him when he had his moment yesterday, and then seeing him how he was on the podium. Very much Big Brother Lewis, I felt, and that was really lovely to see. To be honest, I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, just on that note, we've seen Lewis be really, really sweet, especially with like the younger drivers. I remember when Charles got his first win in Spa 2019, and Lewis went straight over to him and was like, congratulations, like hugs. And like Pierre, when Pierre got his win, and George, he's been really sweet with George as well. Lewis just is the big brother that everybody wants in the paddock.
Definitely.
Isn't he?
It scares me to a point that he's now one of the older drivers, and that
I
makes
know!
me like, I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not as young as I once thought I was, but it's I think him and Vettel are very similar. They had their moments in their youth where they were a little bit, toys out the pram, but they've both grown up and they're both great. And because it's seeing like how Vettel is with Mick, and then how Lewis is with the British drivers, and it's lovely to see, and it's nice for the rookies to have that presence, I think, on the grid.
Definitely. Okay, right. We've reached the end, but I'm asking you guys one final question. Who was your driver of the day?
Lando.
I'm so surprised. Oh, shock horror. That I would have to agree. I think we're all in agreement. Fantastic drive. All weekend, I think he's exhibited his dominance on this circuit, and I think he did a really good job. So
deserved it after yesterday as well.
His only mistake all weekend was going wide at turn 9. And that's literally his only mistake, whereas everyone else made mistakes.
So young, incredible.
Yeah, 100%.
Breakout performance from him. Absolute breakout performance. There's always been a bit of a question mark over his race pace, but this weekend he proved that he has what it takes. And if he gets the right car under him and he gets some decent experience, he'll win races and could potentially win a world championship.
100%.
Oh wow, we're looking very far in the future now. Wow, how exciting!
Him and George is a rivalry to come.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. And Max, they're getting all of them getting involved.
It'd be nice to have 3 different cars and 3 different teams actually fighting for the top spot.
It'll happen.
That'd be really fun,
I think
instead of just having this double header at the moment.
100%. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us on this podcast. Thank you guys for joining me on this podcast, and thanks you guys at home for listening. Sorry. But just remember, guys, that we are always broadcasting these shows live when they air, apart from today because we had some technical difficulties, but usually we will be broadcasting these shows live on YouTube. So make sure you go search F1 Chronicle on YouTube and you will be able to find us and watch the race as they go out. You can ask questions and just basically be the first to hear the podcast. So yeah, make sure you go like and subscribe on the YouTube page. But yeah, our podcasts are available on all platforms, Amazon Music, as well as YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Verbal, Apple Music, Omni Studio, and Pocket Casts. Just search for the title F1 Grid Talk. We have a massive back catalogue of shows, and this is episode 98. So we have tons of old race reviews, and not just race reviews, we've got quali reviews, we've got interviews. So go and get stuck into our massive back catalogue of stuff for you guys and have a look and see what takes your fancy. We do have a subreddit, so search for F1 Grid Talk, and we have a Patreon so you can support us if you choose and help us get better mics, better recording equipment so that we can improve the quality of these podcasts for you guys. Guys, I just wanted you to have a little bit of a chat about your podcast so that the listeners at home can understand where they can go and find you guys. So Tom, Karl, which one of you wants to take it away?
Tom's a better salesman. He knows what he's talking about.
Well, you can catch us on the socials at Monkey Seat Pod. We're only really active on Twitter these days because how many pictures can you post on Instagram really of just like our ugly mugs? So yeah, you can catch us on the socials at Monkey Seat Pod. We've got a website www.monkeyseatpod.com, and we also live stream on YouTube the same as F1 Chronicle. So you can find us by searching.
Tomorrow.
Yes, we will. Yeah. So you can just search for the Monkey Seats podcast. Make sure you put podcast because if you just type Monkey Seat, you get lots of aerodynamic videos and stuff. So yeah, always search for the podcast to catch more of our wax lyricaling about McLaren. And we cover all motorsport as well, not just Formula One. We do IndyCar, Extreme E, Formula E. We'll be doing W Series as well, and Formula 2 and Formula 3 as well. So basically, if it hasn't got a roof, we cover it.
Fantastic.
Even though Extreme E does have a roof, so we won't worry about that.
Fairs. Interesting. Scott, your turn.
So you can find us everything F1. We're at Join F1 on most social medias, so Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We've started poking in our noses into YouTube now as well. That's kind of why I was brought on board to do video content and stuff. So this is a rare public appearance for myself. But yeah, no, our podcasts go out weekly. Again, they are pretty much everywhere. We also do still have a website. It's www.everythingf1.com. We also now have a Discord server as well, where we're trying to build a bit of a community, which that link can be found across all of our socials. And we're also big fans of Manscaped as well, I must say.
There you go, guys. And if you've not heard enough of me, you can go and find me at All About SteF1 on YouTube. That's where I decide to waffle about Formula One. So if you enjoyed hearing me waffle today, you might enjoy me another time. So go check that out. I'm also at All About SteF1 on Instagram and Twitter. Okay, but that brings us to the end of the podcast. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for coming on. We hope you enjoyed, and we will see you for the next one, which will be previewing the Portuguese Grand Prix. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.